The left's smear campaign against Joe Biden, we'll talk about whether or not that is justified. Jussie Smollet's legal woes continue, and some unconstitutional infringement on our rights. We'll talk about these and a few other topics if I don't ramble on too long. And if time permits, I'll have a quick movie review. I'm Big E, and this is the Liberty Cast. What the left is doing to Joe Biden is completely predictable. Now, up until now, he's been the affable elder statesman, I guess, the nice guy with the best chance to beat Donald Trump. His gaffes, just a result of his plain-spoken good nature, I guess.
Romney wants to he said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
But don't get me wrong. Biden has been a creep for a long, long time. There's ample video and photographic evidence of his creepiness going back years, decades even. But the left has been excusing it all along. Now, Biden is a leftist, but I think his time in the Obama White House pulled him even further left than he had been early in his career. But now the Democrat Party is so dominated by socialists, they might as well change their name to the Democrat Socialists of America and be done with it. Just absorb that organization altogether. Because that's what, let's face it, that's what they are. Now, despite his lurch left under the Obama administration, Biden is still not left enough for this party. He probably does still have the best chance of any Democrat, announced or otherwise, to beat Donald Trump right now. But they can't have that. The left cannot have that. Because Biden, despite being a leftist, he won't be fully on board with implementing the agenda that Kamala Harris, Robert Francis, Julian Castro, Kirsten Gillibrand, and all the rest of them have committed to. Because despite his left leanings, he's slightly more reasonable than the rest of the field. And because he's not going to vigorously pursue the left agenda, they're running the smear campaign against him. Smear campaign might not really cover it because that implies that it's not justified. But as I mentioned with the video and photographic evidence, it clearly is. I wish we were doing video so I could show you some of Joe's most egregious acts of groping. And even then it would be tough because there's so many, either on video or photographs. Now, is he a rapist? No, not that we're aware of yet. Has he committed sexual assault? Given some of the evidence that is out there, readily available on YouTube, I would say no, but I will not argue with anyone who says that some of his actions do rise to that level. I personally just think he's really creepy and inappropriate. Although, in fact, I think that in the corporate world, he would have been reprimanded, if not fired, for some of his acts. But yet, despite all of that, he's still in the running to be the Democrat nominee for president in 2020. Now, with his well-documented history, how does that happen? Well, of course, he's a member of the right party. And by right, I mean correct. Remember Ted Kennedy, the lion of the Senate? Someone once said, and I haven't been able to find the quote, maybe it was just out there, maybe it was just a sentiment, but I seem to recall hearing someone say that he has done more for women than anyone. But I think Mary Jo Kopechne and her family might have a different view on that subject, considering that he left her to drown, even though he was known to be a great swimmer. But I digress. But conservatives have known about Biden for a long time. We've all, not just we've all known about Biden for a long time. But it was always just laughed off and dismissed as creepy Uncle Joe. Joe being Joe. He's affectionate. He expresses himself through innocent physical contact. I don't know how innocent it is. I mean, there's video of him talking to a young girl, and she's visibly cringing and moving away from him. The body language is obvious that she's uncomfortable. And that's true in a lot of these instances. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it does rise to the level of assault. I don't know. But it's always just been dismissed, defended even. Whoopi Goldberg and Joyless Behar have defended him vigorously since this whole campaign started. In fact, the entire cast of The View has defended this guy.
In the old days, we would call Joe, some folks of a certain age would say he's a little overly familiar. Yeah. Okay? But most politicians, when they're, doing this with you, and, they are. And Joe is a hands-on kind of guy. Yeah, he is. But no one, I've never heard anyone, and she says she felt violated, and I have to take her at her word.
Wait, what happened to believe all women all the time? I guess that's only if the man they're accusing is on the right side of the political aisle. And not only that, but then she said that all politicians do that. No, they don't. No, they don't. There is not, I won't say not a shred, but when you look at all of the video and photographs of Joe Biden being at the very least inappropriate, you don't see any. Put it this way, if there was a conservative politician who had even a quarter of the inappropriate contact that Joe Biden has had with women and young girls, they would be screaming to lock him up. So Whoopi Goldberg can kill that noise as far as I'm concerned. But here's the point. This has all been well documented, well known over the years. This is not coming from conservatives. This is coming from the left. The left is eating themselves. And they're doing this to Joe Biden because he's a threat to their agenda. There's actually reporting that the Sanders campaign is behind this. Biden is not fully on board with the Green New Deal and Medicare for All and all this other far left nonsense that they're committed to. So he's a threat. And they simply cannot have him disrupt their communist apple cart. Let's move on to some more leftist nonsense, and they're steady claiming that there's no crisis at the border.
President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis.
This is a manufactured crisis. No crisis exists, and anyone making the argument is most likely guilty of fear-mongering and willfully misleading the American people.
Locals will tell him on the border, even conservatives, is that there isn't a national security crisis.
The notion that we have a crisis there, security crisis, is absolute nonsense.
This is a manufactured crisis, and a crisis that manufactured by the Trump administration.
This artificial crisis of the president isn't going to justify his appropriating money for a wall that Congress is unwilling to give.
Is there a crisis at the border? The president said there's a humanitarian crisis at the border. Is there?
Absolutely not. We have a challenge. All our humanitarian issues are challenges for us.
Manufactured crisis, huh? In February of this year, there were 66,450 people apprehended at the southwest border. And that's compared with 47,986 in the month of January and 50,749 in December. Now, in 2018, there was a total of 396,579 individuals that were apprehended at the southwest border. Of the 66,000 in February, 45,000 were family units. Now, although we really have no way of knowing if those were real families, since now all you have to do is present yourself at the border with children and you're going to be admitted, we have no way of knowing. The likelihood is that a lot of those children have been sold into sex trafficking rings. But listen to former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson a couple of weeks ago on Morning Joe.
A little bit of context here. When I was in office in Kirstjen Nielsen's job at her desk, I'd get to work around 6:30 in the morning, and there'd be my intelligence book sitting on my desk, the PDB, and also the apprehension numbers from the day before. And I'd look at them every morning. It'd be the first thing I'd look at, and I probably got too close to the problem. And my staff will tell you, if it was under 1,000 apprehensions the day before, that was a relatively good number. And if it was above 1,000, it was a relatively bad number, and I was going to be in a bad mood the whole day. On Tuesday, there were 4,000 apprehensions. I know that 1,000 overwhelms the system. I cannot begin to imagine what 4,000 a day looks like. So we are truly in a crisis.
Did you hear that? 1,000 overwhelms the system. Now, the CBP Commissioner, Kevin McAleenan, said that it's a matter of time before tragedy strikes at one of these facilities, because last week at the facility in El Paso, there were over 13,000 migrants in custody. Most of them were families or unaccompanied children. Jay Johnson said 1,000 overwhelms the system. 4,000, he couldn't imagine how that would affect it. And according to McAleenan, he sets a crisis level at 6,000, and 13,000 is where we're at right now. So how is that not a crisis? But yet and still, the left is saying that the crisis is manufactured, doesn't exist. How can anyone look at those numbers and think everything is fine? Think that there's no crisis? Think that the president is manufacturing this out of whole cloth? Now, when you consider that we don't know who these people are, and once they're processed, they get released into the interior of the country, never to be heard from again, until they commit a crime or end up dead. What is it if it's not a crisis? So if this isn't a crisis, what would constitute a crisis to the left? If it's not 13,000, if it's not 66,000 in a month, is it 70,000? 100,000? Now, this is illegal immigration we're talking about. President Trump told a group of local officials during his visit to the border last week, and I'm quoting now, "Our country's full. Our area is full. The sector is full. We can't take you anymore, I'm sorry. Can't happen, so turn around. That's the way it is." I am completely on board with that. What do you think? We admit 1 million immigrants every year legally. Personally, I think it's time to close the border and put a moratorium on immigration altogether for at least the next 2 to 5 years. But why is it that the left, many of whom have actually said in the past that what was going on at the border is a crisis before Trump took office, but now, because it's President Trump, even though apprehensions are up, the number of people being released into the country is up, now it's not a crisis? Why? Well, if you've been listening to this show on a regular basis, you know why. They need votes. They can't win on the ideas that they're presenting to the American people now. So they have to import votes. And they know that once illegals get across the border, they're going to get access to all kinds of free stuff. Not the least of which in many states is a driver's license. And once they get a license, there's literally nothing stopping them from voting in any election. Yeah, they say that the licenses clearly say not to be used for any federal purposes, but come on. The federal government is terrible at everything. Do you really think that just because some words are on a on an identification card that's going to stop illegals from voting? Now, California, they're one of 12 states that issue driver's license to illegals. And like I said, the licenses show that they're not valid for federal purposes. Come on. And California has already admitted that they mistakenly registered illegals to vote with their motor voter campaign. They admitted to allowing 1,500 to register, but do you really think in a state of 13 million people that the number was only 1,500? Please. And do you really think they canceled that registration? No, they didn't. And I'm obviously speculating, but when you consider that their goal is to have illegals vote, what do you think the chances are that they made any effort to rectify the situation? They've been railing against Trump colluding with Russia to hack or fix or otherwise influence our elections, even though there is no evidence to support such a claim, the donut for evidence. Yet they're running on an open border policy to let anyone who shows up into the country, effectively importing votes. There's the real foreign influence. There's the real collusion. And it's not like these people show up wanting to be Americans either. They show up waving the flag of the country from which they just fled, supposedly seeking asylum, supposedly seeking a better life. But we know that's a lie. They've been coached on what to say, and we all know that they're just economic migrants looking for work, which, as we all know, is not grounds for seeking asylum. Now, with what's being dubbed the mother of all caravans forming in Honduras, which is said could be up to 20,000 by the time it reaches the United States. If 6,000 is a crisis level, 13,000 is unprecedented. How in the world are we supposed to deal with 20,000? Well, of course we can't. It's a crisis, no matter how many times or how loudly they yell that it's not. It is. All right, y'all, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about these red flag laws and what they really mean. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Weld County, Colorado Sheriff Steve Reams has expressed a willingness to go to jail rather than enforce the red flag law that was recently passed in that state. I applaud this sheriff, and there are sheriffs in a number of other states that have expressed the same willingness. In Nevada, 15 of the state's 17 counties have declared those counties Second Amendment sanctuary counties, along with 13 of the 36 counties in Oregon, 39 of the 102 counties in Illinois, 23 of Colorado's 64 counties, and 24 of Washington State's 39 counties. And then New Mexico, 26 out of 33 counties. Now, some of these states are among the 14 states who have adopted red flag laws as well, also known as extreme risk protection orders. Florida, New York, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Vermont, California, Connecticut, Indiana, Oregon, and Washington. Now, of those states, only Delaware's red flag law requires a mental health professional to determine whether the person is a danger to him or herself or others. New Jersey has a measure, but it's separate from the red flag law, but at least they have something like that in place. But why is this sheriff and the other sheriffs in the counties that I mentioned Why are they so against these red flag laws? 4 words: shall not be infringed. These laws in almost every case are enforced with no due process. Anyone who calls the police can express a concern about the possibility of a gun owner committing a crime. And that's it. That's all that's needed. They don't even have to live in the state under Colorado's law. So depending on the state, anyone can file a complaint. Now, the judge who hears the case only has a statement of concern from some random citizen. One of the things that sets this country apart, aside from the Second Amendment, is the value that we put on due process. People always have their preconceived notions about a person's guilt or innocence, and due process allows that to be adjudicated in a court of law. It protects people accused of crimes from being punished because limited information and circumstantial evidence can have some people believing without any other proof that a person is guilty. It allows someone accused of a crime an opportunity to defend themselves. Now, guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And when it comes to depriving someone of their constitutional right to defend themselves or their family, there should at the very least, be probable cause. And someone making a phone call from halfway across the country does not meet that standard in any way whatsoever. Take, for example, California, one of the very first states to adopt this unconstitutional measure in 2014. In 2016, there were 86 gun seizures as a result of these red flag laws. In 2018, there were 424. That's a near 5-fold spike in gun seizures. Now, of course, we all know how much California hates guns. They're doing everything they possibly can to deprive Californians of their rights. I don't believe for a second that all 424 of those cases were justified or adjudicated properly. So not only does this deprive someone of their rights and due process, but according to research by the Crime Prevention Research Center, these laws do not have any significant effect on murder, suicide, mass public shootings, robbery, etc. So if they don't have any effect on the crimes that they're trying to prevent, what is the purpose? Taking away your rights. That's the only possible purpose it can serve. So bravo to Sheriff Reams and all the other county sheriffs that are standing up to these unconstitutional laws, because they recognize that their duty is to uphold the Constitution and represent the will of the people that elected them into office. Okay, there's a couple other things I want to get to real quick before I get you out of here. The Chicago Police Department is suing hate crimes hoaxer Jussie Smollet for the cost of the investigation into his phony claims that he was beaten up, doused with bleach, had a noose put around his neck while the assailants were screaming, "This is MAGA country," and other racial or homophobic slurs. $130,000. I personally think they should be suing for a lot more than that. I get why they didn't. They didn't want to seem vindictive or trying to punish him without going to trial, since the charges were actually dropped. I get it. But still, the fact that the charges were dropped and he only got 16 hours of community service and what amounted to a $10,000 fine is beyond ridiculous. So they calculated how much it cost the city and are aiming to recoup just that amount. Now it seems as though he's going to fight it because his lawyer, Mark Garagos, has responded via letter on Smollett's behalf, stating that he vehemently denies making false statements, and further states in that letter that your claim that Smollet filed a false police report and orchestrated his own attack is false and defamatory. So he's still maintaining his innocence. Now, I get it. His lawyer has to provide a vigorous defense. But in light of what we know to be true, and I know we just talked about due process and things like that, but there is still a mountain of evidence against him. So you would think that Geragos would tone down his rhetoric just a tad. I mean, the grand jury indicted him on 16 charges. Come on, man. I don't think there's anyone left that actually believes that he's innocent. I know I don't. Do you? And does the due process standard even apply in this case, since the state's attorney dropped the charges? Is there a possibility that the Chicago PD jumped to a conclusion and presented the evidence to fit that narrative? Of course there is. There's always that possibility. And there's always that possibility in any case with any police department. And I say that as one of the most ardent supporters of the police that you will find. But people can be corrupted. That's just the way it is. And so despite the enormous amount of respect I have for the police and the job that they do, as long as human beings are involved, there's the possibility for corruption. But I think if that were the case, Superintendent Johnson and his department would have had a completely different tone than they had during the course of that investigation. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, though. And let's not forget, don't forget that the FBI is still investigating Smollet for sending himself that threatening letter. And they're also looking into the circumstances surrounding the drop charges. So, like I said, this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. All right, folks, that's all the time we have today. I didn't get a chance to give you that movie review that I talked about, but I'll just say that I finally saw Bumblebee, the Transformers movie, and I highly recommend it. But if you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's @TheLibertyCast on all 3 platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. So until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.